Bakanı Salim Madriwalla var. Minister of State of Pakistan, His Excellency Salim Madriwalla, please welcome to the stage.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellency President Gul, he is not here, but I would like to take his name anyway. Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. We call President Gul our elder brother, and I am profoundly grateful and touched by the honor given to me by the government of Turkey for inviting me to this great platform. I feel Turkey is always home, away from home, and for the love and affection shown to us here, we always feel at home. I congratulate President Gul for hosting this timely platform to share and discuss the ways and means to enhance mutual cooperation in order to inspire development for the benefit of our people. The world is facing enormous challenges today, from ethnic conflicts, infectious diseases, natural calamities, terrorism, climate changes, energy shortages, food and water, increasing population, depletion of resources, poverty and human migration, and inequalities between developed and underdeveloped world. This serious issue affects the ability of national governments and international organizations to deal with them, and thus calls for collective action and more cooperation for management of common problems. Ladies and gentlemen, today the information, communication, technologies and means of transportation have facilitated mobility and reduced physical distances between our countries. Integration of national economies into international economy through trade, foreign direct investment, capital flows and migration. I feel that we need to cooperate more and more between our region, and especially the regional countries. I define cooperation as the system of interactions between different actors involved in the matters of public concern, and the institution as the principle for regulating these relationships. Present-day international cooperation involves sovereign states, intergovernmental organization, non-governmental organization, and social movements. They all participate and influence in the policy and decision-making of progress at various levels and degrees. The important role of regionalism as a policy goal and as a trend in international cooperation needs to be looked into. Interaction between regionalism and globalization need to be stressed, as it is a link between local and global levels. Innovative institutional reforms, agreement of different issues are needed. Identification of common goals is important to ensure that decisions taken are sustainable, legitimate, and populations see the benefits of them, which is the most important thing. With pride, I say that we have visionary leadership leading our countries closer in every field, from economy, trade and investment, people-to-people contacts. And the good news is many of these issues are already working in progress. And some of our Turkish friends are sitting here who I met, who are keen to cooperate. We need to strengthen our economic and trade relations with our main focus on increasing bilateral trade. We should make use of our rich cultural resources to carry out device culture exchanges. We should give higher priority to welfare policies, unity of interest and focus on. I strongly feel as a regional force, we can effectively contribute towards international cooperation and resolve the global problems. The reality is that we need to have institutional political will, common projects and institutional machinery, capacity all together to create cooperation dynamics. Coherence starts at home. Therefore, I emphasize the need to strengthen the framework of ECO and OIC. I propose free trade agreements, more market access, products and relaxed visa policy amongst our countries. We need to share our experience, support our brotherly countries which are not at the same level of development. Our internal stability and harmony and prosperity will make us useful and effective members of the international community. With one strong voice, we will be able to tackle the global issues. You have heard from everybody else, I think, all the details, so I will not go into that. But I take this opportunity to thank the government and people of Turkey from the bottom of my heart for their generous support and providing yet once again, Turkey is a great friend of Pakistan. Long live Pakistan friendship. Thank you, sir.
His Excellency, would you mind to come again to the stage in order to take your placard? I'm sorry. Sayın Büyükelçim Nusret Kandemir'i davet ediyorum sahneye plaketi vermek üzere. Thank you very much. Evet, şimdi sırada Mısır Ticaret ve Endüstri Bakanı Raşit Muhammed Raşit var. Minister of Trade and Industry of Egypt, His Excellency Mr. Raşit Muhammed Raşit. Please welcome to the stage.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be here standing among you today in this very distinguished gathering and hosted by the government of Turkey and honored by the presence of President Gül in this international cooperation platform. I totally support and I'm happy that the idea of having a platform and a forum that addresses regional issues have been initiated by the government as well as the people of Turkey. Many of the participants in this conference used to meet in many international conferences, and unfortunately we were using conferences like Davos and others to talk about issues related to us. So it was really time to encourage even more the ability to have in our own region platforms and conferences that address regional issues. So in that respect, I would like to thank and congratulate the organizers of this conference and wish them success. And I know this is the first one, and I'm sure this is not going to be the last. There will be many to follow. I'm sure I am among many people sitting in this room who have lived in the last century. And when we were looking at the 21st century, and I remember very vividly the eve and the midnight of the year 2000 when everybody around the globe was waiting for how this hour is going to be manifested, people never expected that the first decade of the 21st century will be so exciting as it is. In the last 10 years, the first of the 21st century, everything that we did not expect in the 20th century happened. Nobody expected wars, nobody expected financial crisis, nobody expected a big shift and big changes in the economy, but they all did happen in less than 10 years. And there are, of course, events which are shaping today not only nations, but they're even shaping the life of every individual around the globe. Nobody in this room, in one way or another, have escaped the impact of 9/11. From the people who have been influenced economically, to people who have been harassed in airports, to people who have been changing their plans and lifestyle. Every single person in one way or another have been influenced by such an event. The financial economic crisis of 2008-2009 was a major earthquake. Again, nobody was expecting that such a solid foundation, based on all the lessons that have been learned in the 20th century following the big recession, are going to be disappearing overnight, and the world will be faced with a situation never expected before. Everybody was expecting emerging economies to move more and more into the center of the world economy. But again, nobody expected the speed of such move. So the rate of growth today in emerging economies is taking everybody by surprise. I would like just to remind people that in 1980, excuse me, in 1980, the economy of the so-called triad, United States, Europe, and Japan, was 85% of the total world economy. By the year 2000, that have dropped from 85% to almost 68%. In less than 10 years now, that rate is 50%. So the shift that is happening today from the developing countries to developed countries is exceeding any expectation anybody had in terms of speed. Well, another phenomenon nobody expected was the rapidly rising resource consumption and sustainability of this resource. It wasn't too far away. Nobody ever dreamed of a barrel of oil at 100 pounds, $100. Today, people feel comfortable with 80, 85, and I feel that's even an acceptable price. And if we take that same example across many commodities, whether minerals or agriculture, again, we have all experienced something we have never expected in the last 10 years. The inflation, the surge in commodity prices, the surge in consumption, the start of worry of sustainability is again a new world we are living in. So we are living a completely different world than the one we expected. And what is even more scary, that the pace of change is faster than what we can grasp on an everyday level. Meaning that everything we plan to do within the next year or two, in a month from today, will be influenced by all the changes that are taking shape around the globe. Just look at last week's events with WikiLeaks, a name that people never imagined will have an influence on any of the policies. Maybe it was the connotation was a video game, but WikiLeaks today, and we all know, will influence policies, life, and economies in the next few weeks, months, and years. In one way or another, it will have an impact. And nobody was even planning for that a few days ago. The reality of the interdependence. We are today definitely a world that is interdepending on each other. People were still debating, and this is another demonstration of the pace of change. People are still debating whether globalization is bad, globalization is good, globalization is positive, negative factor in development, but that train have already passed. We would have never been in the world of 2010 if it wasn't globalization. The reality of today is more that globalization is not even equal. People were saying that the decoupling theory, and that is just 18 months ago, will never be realized. Well, we are living today in a decoupled theory. And what is meant by decoupled theory? That the emerging market have been able to isolate themselves from the developed countries, mainly United States and Europe and Japan, and are able now to grow at rates 3-4 times faster. That theory did not exist 18 months ago. People said if the United States and Europe will slow down, everybody else will slow down. This is not reality. Turkey, this year, have seen in one quarter a growth of over 11%. China is still growing at 8, 9, 10, 11%. India is growing still at 7, 8%. Egypt is growing at 6%, despite the fact that everybody else in the developed countries is still worried. Another important factor we have to consider when we look at the global economy is the emergence of the middle class lifestyle. Calculations today confirm that within the next decade, one decade, the population living by what is defined middle-class lifestyle will double, which will mean an additional $8 trillion of business globally. And that's the reality. Everybody around the world today is aware that the fact that there is a surge in the middle class of China, in India, in Turkey, in Brazil, in many of these emerging markets, is the main drive behind consumption increase and growth increase. And what is amazing, before I leave the international scene, just to share with you, that what have been manifesting itself in the last decade is the reality that the human factor is becoming even more important. The human factor and the individual and the human development is becoming even more important than people thought last century. The equation of emerging markets today have been based on the fact of population. It was less than 2 decades ago that people felt that China, India are a hopeless case because of their population numbers. Today, look at the expectation that have been put by Goldman Sachs that have influenced decisions by people globally around the world just by saying BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. The reality that many of those countries, 3 or at least out of them, the main factor for attractiveness in investment today is their population. So what happened after the BRIC? Last year, when the BRIC have started to become real reality and people are already all over the place with BRIC, people are talking now about 2 acronyms reflecting 2 groups of countries, the 7th and the next 11. Well, Goldman Sachs came with a new list of N11, and The Economist came with the 7th, and luckily for our region, we have 2 major of our economies in that list, Turkey and Egypt. They are in the N11 and are in the 7th. And the reason why both of them are there, among other countries globally, is population, is a human factor, is the ability to turn people and heads and bodies into a valuable resource. But there is one lesson that we can draw from all the changes that are happening, and they are influencing us in a very, very influential way. And that is the reality that the real competitive advantage of any nation now is their regionality. The difference between Turkey and Egypt and Indonesia and China and Brazil and Argentina will depend a lot on how active they are in the regions. And this is the key factor into driving now regional economies from being a sort of political and a part of a globalization event that was taking place in the last few decades into something that is moving into the heart of economic development of every country. We have seen it in Turkey. Turkey has been a great success story in turning regionalization into the dynamism of the local economic development. And no doubt about it, the issue now of regionalization is going to become even more and more important. We are in a region that have been talking for the last at least 60 years about regional economic development. And definitely out of the 60 years, we had most of these years of disappointment in terms of realizing this cooperation. But things are changing. In the last decade, things are changing. One, because the equation now is becoming very clear that this is part of the economic development. We in Egypt, we started the reform, and we are very clear that an important part of the reform and delivering that economic development results is our ability to regionalize. Why this is more important now? Because historically people thought if they can depend only on the market of the United States, if they can depend only on the market of Europe, they can ignore the region. This is not the case anymore. The second element is that regionalization is creating an additional competitive advantage through networking, and that is becoming even more and more substantial and important. The third element, that we cannot continue development theories based purely on export. So you need to create bigger local markets and regional markets. So the ability today that we can sit together in a room, talk about energy, talk about infrastructure, talk about sustainable development, talk about agriculture, talk about consumption, and at the end of the day, turn all these challenges into opportunities of a local market, that is the heart of our competitive economic situation for every single country. Another important element is the importance of rivalry. People always felt that competition between countries is bad politics. I was just asked by a reporter before coming into this session, how do you think you can cooperate with Turkey while Turkey is your main competitor, especially in areas like tourism? Turkey is competing with you, so why do you think there is a possibility there? And I said, well, first of all, we need competition. Competition is good for Turkey and competition is good for Egypt. And the idea of having this competition, and out of this competition we can both improve and excel, and at the same time find complementary and areas of cooperation, that is the art of regionalization. But in the meantime, we all know that the most important factor today of development economically is rivalry. Because we envy our neighbor, we start to do better. That's what happened in China. That's what happened in Malaysia. That's what happened in Europe. That's what happened in East Europe. Everybody is saying, if my neighbor is doing better, why can't I do the same? And if he's having a good idea, I can also do the same. And that can only happen if we have a more active private sector, which we are all now blessed to have, and we are all very happy that we are able now to devise policies that are supporting more and more private sector. Of course, that will need regionally to expand our networks. And I'm very happy that this conference is talking about infrastructure, especially railway and roads and airways. This is very critical. The ability of movement of goods and people is extremely important, because most of us have always been talking about how blessed we are of having a very strategic geographical situation. And somehow everybody in this region thinks that he's at the center of the world. We do that in Egypt. I think they do in Turkey. I'm sure they do in Pakistan. And I'm sure they do everywhere else. But the reality, if we do not have proper infrastructure, we are as bad as Australia. Nothing changes for us if we cannot move our goods, if we cannot move our people, if we don't have airways, if we don't have maritime connections. We cannot claim that this geographical position is a blessing and an advantage. That is changing. And that in itself is creating a huge regional advantage for businesses to grow and to be able to turn this kind of challenges into opportunity. I would like just to conclude by giving a few minutes of what this thoughts and this kind of vision influenced the relationship between Egypt and Turkey. Egypt and Turkey until 2005 was negotiating a free trade agreement for a period of 10 years. Nobody was convinced on both sides that we should sign it. People thought that we are competing with each other and we will just kill each other if we sign a free trade agreement. We have the same industry, we have the same advantages of cost and so on, and people thought that this is bad business, we shouldn't do it. In 2005, despite the resistance internally, both governments, because both governments had a very clear reform mentality, they decided to sign the agreement in the presence of both presidents, and the agreement was signed in 2005. The trade number was $700 million at the time. Today, the trade is $3 billion. Today, we have an investment, joint investment between the two countries about $2 billion. Today, there are more than 230 Turkish companies operating in Egypt, employing more than 65,000 Egyptians. At the time of the signing of the agreement, we had, on a weekly basis, 7 flights between Cairo and Istanbul. Today, the number is 34, and they're all full. Things are happening, and they're happening in the right direction. Turkish economy is benefiting, Egyptian economy is benefiting, and we are both seeing even more and more possibility to grow and to build value together for the Egyptian economy and for the Turkish economy. Fortunately, that story can be and can be told about many other examples in the region. But being in Turkey here, I think it's proper to say the Turkish-Egyptian story and the Turkish-Egyptian example, and I'm very confident that this kind of thoughts, ideas, are not only today in the mind of government officials and politicians, but they are very much embedded now into the minds of leaders of the business on the private sector. And that is also why we are very proud to see that we have more and more now regional companies that have strategies to be regional, whether they are based in Turkey, in Egypt, in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia, in Pakistan, in Morocco. We do have today companies that are operating on a regional level. And these are the real players that will make this regionalization a reality. So I'm very optimistic, I'm very confident that we are moving on the right direction. All we can do as governments is to make sure that this movement is accelerated and it is moved even on a faster pace, and be cautious not to let the politics of the region influence negatively that economic movement for the years to come. Thank you very much.
Sayın Bakan'a plaketi vermek üzere Sayın Yıldırım Coşkun'u davet ediyorum. Buyurun efendim. Evet, şimdi sırada Aga Muhammedi, İran Cumhurbaşkanı Yardımcısı ve Türkiye ile ilişkiler özel temsilcisi var. Deputy of the Iran Vice President and the Special Representative for Turkey's Affairs, His Excellency Aga Muhammedi. Please welcome to the stage.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. بسیار خوشحال هستم که در اجلاسی شرکت میکنم که بنای اون سازندگی است و تشکر میکنم از جناب آقای گل رئیس جمهور محترم ترکیه و اتاق بازرگانی ترکیه و همه مقامات که این اجلاس رو برگزار کردن. فکر میکنم همینطور که برادرانمون از پاکستان و مصر بیان کردند، من مبتنی بر صحبت‌های اونها صحبتم رو ادامه میدم. صحبت‌هایی که پایه همکاری رو بر این قرار میده که ما اختلافات خود رو منجمد کنیم و روابط خود رو به گسترش ببریم. در هیچ منطقه‌ای بدون اختلاف امکان زندگی نیست، اما اون چه مهم است این که اختلافات رو توسعه ندهیم و به تدریج رو به حل ببریم، ولی اون چه که میتوانیم از روابط گسترش بدیم. خوشبختانه ما در منطقه‌ای زندگی میکنیم که منابع طبیعی فراوانی دارد: نفت، گاز، آب، زمین‌های حاصلخیز. نیروی انسانی جوان و با نشاطی دارد. رشد سریع در آن امکان پذیر است و دین به تدریج نقش مثبت خود را ایفا می کند. آنچه که به نام دین تلاش شد چهره‌ای مانند طالبان رو دین بنامند، به تدریج از صفحه ذهن مسلمان ها دور میشه و دین سازنده و دین زندگی جلوه‌گر میشه و دین نقشش رو در توسعه به خوبی ایفا میکنه. نمونه اون آمدن اسلامگراها در ترکیه، نمونه اون حضور مسلمان ها در ایران، نمونه اون حضور گرایش‌های مثبت‌تر اما سازنده‌تر برای رشد و جلو بردن مسائل. خوشبختانه اونها که ترور رو در این منطقه کاشتند به تدریج خود گرفتار نتایج ترورها شدند و تروریست پرورها به تدریج از سیاستمداران رو به سوی ترور دانشمندان آوردند. امروز فیزیکدانها، شیمیدانها، کسانی که در آیتی کار میکنند به تدریج مورد حمله غرب قرار میگیرند، چرا که راه نجات در این منطقه شناخته شده: راه علم، راه دانش، راه دین همسوی با علم و دانش و راه دین زندگی ساز. ما در این منطقه اونچه که در برنامه ایران هست من به اشاره برای 5 سال آینده میگویم که میتواند در همین منطقه مورد اشتراک قرار بگیره. ما در طول 5 سال آینده 1000 میلیارد دلار سرمایه گذاری رو خواهیم داشت و هفته گذشته برنامه ما به تصویب رسیده است. ما آمادگی داریم از 2 میلیون بشکه صادرات نفت با همکاری کشورهای منطقه 1 میلیون بشکه اون رو در منطقه مورد مصرف قرار بدیم. اگر پالایشگاه، اگر پتروشیمی، اگر صنایع انرژی بر در منطقه توسعه پیدا بکنه. ما آمادگی داریم در 100 میلیارد دلار سرمایه گذاری در منطقه مشارکت داشته باشیم و ما برای واردات در طول 5 سال آینده 500 میلیارد دلار واردات خواهیم داشت. آمادگی داریم اون چه در منطقه امکان دارد وارد بشه، به جای اینکه از دیگران وارد کنیم این کار رو در منطقه انجام بدیم و ما صادراتی حدود 350 میلیارد دلار رو خواهیم داشت که برای رفع نیازهای منطقه آمادگی جهت‌دهی رو داریم و فکر می‌کنیم زمینه کار در پتروشیمی، در گاز، در برق، در راه آهن، در نفت، در آب، در غذا، در فولاد، در آلومینیوم، در ساختمان، در راه، در مترو، در خودرو و در مخابرات و آیتی از همه جهات در منطقه آماده است. اما فقط یک شرط دارد، اون که از نو سامانه مالی خود رو تعریف کنیم و اعتماد به یکدیگر رو بالا ببریم و اعتبار کشورهای خود رو نزد یکدیگر افزایش دهیم. کاهش اعتبار ما برای هم و قبول کردن اعتبار دیگران برای کشورهای ما موجب به عقب افتادگی ما و نقشه‌ای غیر از نقشه ماست. نقشه ما میتواند در گفتگو بین این کشورها شکل بگیرد. ما منطقه چشمانداز رو بین 26 کشور تعریف کرده ایم که 26 کشور همسایگانش از یک طرف روسیه است، از یک طرف هند و از یک طرف چین. این منطقه در درون خود میتواند بسیار رشد سریعی را داشته باشد و ما امیدوار هستیم این نقطه شروع رو بر این راستا داشته باشیم. ایران، ترکیه، سوریه و عراق 4 نخست وزیر تفاهم کردند منطقه ساعت سوریه، ایران، عراق، ترکیه رو به زودی سازماندهی کنند تجارت آزاد، توریسم آزاد و تمام تفاهمات در این منطقه بر مبنای حرکت گسترده رو به جلو. طبیعی است لبنان، اردن به سمت مصر و از این طرف به سمت پاکستان و از سمت دیگر به سمت آذربایجان و شامل شدن خاورمیانه، قفقاز و آسیای میانه آرزوی همه ماست، به امید روزی که همه با هم برای هدف متعالی ترقی انسانهای منطقه تلاش بکنیم و انشاءالله در این زمینه شما از کسانی باشید که این گام نخست رو برمی‌دارید. بسیار متشکرم.
Kendilerini takdim etmek için plaketi Kamilerini sahneye davet ediyorum. Şimdi sırada Dr. Halit bin Muhammed El Atiye, Katar Uluslararası İlişkiler Devlet Bakanı. Dr. Halit bin Muhammed El Atiye, Minister of State of Qatar, please welcome to the stage. Kendileri sanırım şu anda salonda bulunmuyorlar. O zaman biz programı devam etmek için Sayın Büyükelçi Nusret Kandemir'i sahneye davet ediyorum. Arz ederim efendim, buyurun.
Boğaziçi Bölgesel Ortaklık Zirvesi'ni şereflendiren tüm katılımcıları saygıyla selamlıyorum. Bugün kısa ve genel hatlarıyla siyasi ve ekonomik bağlamlarda Türk dış politikasının ulusal ve bölgesel çerçevedeki görüntüsünü çizmek görevi bana verildi. 5 dakika içinde bu tabloyu ortaya nasıl çıkartacağımı tam bilmiyorum ama izninizle hemen başlamak istiyorum. Önce genel birkaç müşahedemi takdirlerinize arz etmek istiyorum. Dış politika bağlamında yapılan değerlendirme ve analizler genelde uzun vadede sonuç almaya yönelik bir içerik ve karakter taşır. Bu yüzden süratli sonuçlar peşinde koşulan iç politika sahnesinde pek de sevildiği ve takdir edildiği söylenemez. Ancak ne yazık ki iç politikaya endeksli olarak yürütülmeye çalışılan dış politika uygulamaları da bugüne kadar pek başarılı sonuçlar vermemiştir. Dış politikalar ülkelerin genel politik, ekonomik gerçeklerinden bağımsız değildir. Zaten ülke gerçeklerinden uzak, onlara ters düşen, kopukluk içinde bir dış politika bütününü düşünmek de gerçekçi ve olası değildir. Şimdi burada son günlerde çok konuşulan bu diplomatik temsilcilerin görevi konusuna kısaca değinmek istiyorum. Diplomatik temsilciler görevli bulundukları ülkede iç ve dış politika bağlamında olup bitenleri objektif bir tarzda saptayıp değerlendirmek ile görevlidir. Herhangi bir sübjektif ayrım ya da ülkeler itibariyle tercihli bir davranış ve değerlendirme yapmaları profesyonelliğe aykırı olduğu gibi kendi ülkelerinin uzun vadeli çıkarlarına da ters düşer. Bugün ortaya çıkan manzara budur. Türk dış politikasının ana ekseni, madem uzun zamandır eksen lafı ediliyor, Türk dış politikasının ana ekseni tarihi olarak bazı ilkeler bütününe dayanır. Bu ilkeleri ayakta ve canlı tutan unsurların başında milli dayanışma, adalet ve insan haklarına saygı ve Atatürk'ün öncülüğünde benimsenen milliyetçilik ögelerine bağlılık alaşımının ortaya çıkarttığı demokratik, laik ve sosyal bir hukuk devletinin bekası, devamı gelir. Türk dış politikası tarihin bazı devrelerinde siyasi akımların etkisinde kalarak bu ana eksenden sapma eğilimi gösterebilmiştir. Ancak Türk milleti biraz önce değindiğim ilkeler bütününe daima sadık kalmış ve ana eksenin kökten değişmesine izin vermeyeceğini demokratik çerçevede ortaya koyabilmiştir. Tarih şunu göstermektedir ki, hukukun üstünlüğüne, demokrasi ve insan haklarına özen göstermeyen, yanlış ve ters uygulamalara göz yuman milletler, bu şekilde ya da bir şekilde başkalarının yörüngesine girmekten kendilerini kurtaramamıştır. Sonuçta uluslararası dış politika uygulamalarında esas olan eşitler arası ilişkilerin eşit düzeyde yürütülmesini sağlamakta gösterilecek beceridir. Önemli olan budur. Türk dış politikası sürekli değişkenlik gösteren günümüz dünyasında çok boyutluluğunu korumak zorundadır. Amerika Birleşik Devletleri kadar Avrupa Birliği, Afrika, Orta Doğu, kuzey komşusu Rusya Federasyonu kadar Orta Asya ve Uzak Doğu ile aynı ölçüde ilişkiler içinde olmak gereğini görmekte ve takdir etmektedir. Bu bağlamda İslam alemi ve Arap dünyası Türkiye için ihmali mümkün olmayacak kadar büyük önem taşımaktadır. Bunun altını bilhassa çizmekte yarar vardır diye düşünüyorum. Böyle bir denge politikasında seçilecek yollar ve metotlar ile kullanılacak üslup yaşamsal öneme sahiptir. Uluslararası ilişkilerde dostluklara aynı şekilde olumlu karşılık vermek doğaldır. Ancak haksız davranışların da benzer şekilde yanıtını bulacağı ve bunun getireceği her türlü risk ve zararı duraksamadan göğüslemeye milletçe hazır olunduğu kanısının muhataplar nezdinde yaratılmış olması gerekir. Türk dış politikasında inandırıcılık ve saygınlıktan taviz vermek olası değildir. İlişkileri duygusal ve tepkisel bir çerçeveden kurtarmak, karşılıklı çıkarlara dayanan doğal ve kabul edilebilir bir çerçeveye oturtmak gereğine inanılır. Bölgesel istikrar ve işbirliği unsurları titizlikle korunmaya çalışılır ve Türkiye böyle bir istikrara ve genel dengelerin korunmasına katkıda bulunmak azmindedir, gayretindedir. Bölgesel ekonomik işbirliğinin geliştirilmesi bağlamında düşünüldüğünde, Türkiye'nin oynayabileceği rol, Türk dış politikasının çok önemli unsurlarından biri olmayı sürdürmektedir. Bütün bu söylediklerimin ışığında, Türk dış politikasında bir eksen kayması olduğu kanaatimce söylenemez. Sadece süratle değişen şartlara uyum sağlayarak, her alanda olayların önünden gitmeyi amaçlayan bir denge politikasını sürdürebilme gayretleri vardır. Sonuç itibariyle dış politika çoğu kez yersiz ve gereksiz gibi görünen davranış ve uygulamaların büyük bir sabırla karşılanıp değerlendirilmesi sanatıdır. Boğaziçi Bölgesel Ortaklık Zirvesi de bölgeler arası işbirliği, anlayış, karşılıklı saygı ve sevgi çerçevesinde ortak çalışma alanlarının daha da güçlendirilerek sağlanmasına yardımcı olabilecektir kanaat ve düşüncesiyle tertiplenmiştir. Hep birlikte dünyaya örnek olacak sonuç ve başarılara ulaşılabileceği inancıyla hepinize bir kez daha saygılar sunuyorum.
Sayın Büyükelçimize teşekkür ediyoruz. Bu arada uluslararası ilişkilerin geleceği ve bölgesel işbirliği fırsatları ana temalı bölümümüzü bitirdik. Şimdi yaklaşık 13-15'e kadar devam edecek yeni bir bölümümüze başlıyoruz. Ana temamız yeni yüzyılda bölgesel işbirliği fırsatları. Konuşmacımız Demir Kırdar, Invest Crop International Limited Yönetim Kurulu Başkanı. Lütfen kendilerini sahneye davet ediyorum. Buyurun efendim.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, of course the previous speakers have covered from positions of responsibility and government of what is happening today within the region and the cooperation, very much in line with the theme of this conference. For me, it's a great pleasure to be part of this distinguished group and address you. My remarks will be drawn from my own experience and observations of the success of the economic success of Turkey and my own personal experiences in the Gulf states. One conclusion I reached from comparing the progress in Turkey and what is happening in the Gulf, and that is, for any nation wishing to achieve ultimate economic success, there is one prerequisite, in my opinion, and that is a solid long-term commitment to sound nation building. The results cannot be instant. The progress takes decades and generations. Turkey today is a shining example of economic success. This year's growth rate was over 10%, which is among the highest in the world. But this success, in my opinion, is due to a fundamental factor that goes back to the nation-building process that has gone through in building this country. Following the end of the Ottoman Empire, and in the early part of the 20th century, the founder of the new Turkish Republic had the vision and the dedication to build a world-class nation over many, many years. The foundation of a modern state with a long-term institutional base inspired men and women over many generations to build a state based on rule of law and an opportunity for everyone to excel. Generation after generation, the breadth and depth of the Turkey's educational system has produced thousands of scientists, doctors, engineers, artists, thinkers, writers, and also it allowed entrepreneurs to build an economic base for the country. This economic and industrial base for the country was first to satisfy the needs of the republic itself, and it's a big country. But as the industrial experience has excelled, and with skills and talents rising up, the productivity of the country started to extend beyond the domestic needs. It started to export. Today, Turkey's exports, I think last year was $110 billion of various products, and these exports were to America, to Europe, and to the Far East. Over the decades this has been built, and we are seeing some results today. And I think that's the lesson that we want to come up with. Whether you're building an institution or a country, there are time to put into building the foundation first, and then the culture, and then allowing human resource development. In my view, the credit belongs to the clarity of vision and the country's leaders all along, including the leaders today. They deserve a great credit for the results that are being achieved by this country. I think all along, over generations, they understood that nation building takes many generations, and were single-minded about laying the foundations for a solid future for the growth. I think one can draw an analogy with the biggest country in the world, the United States of America. If you see that the founding fathers there established a foundation, and that inspired hundreds of thousands of people, millions maybe, to immigrate and cross the Atlantic and come in to participate in nation building. I think those who worked hard over the generations knew very well that the results would not be instant, that the enterprise on which they were engaged would stretch beyond their own lifetime. Today, I see the same thing happening in the Gulf states. And that's where my experience comes in my engagement with the Gulf. For the last 30 years, I've been working there. Throughout the region, I see the leaders are committed to nation building and developing the skills and resources that their countries will need in the future. Like Turkey, the Gulf states would like to become an integral part of the global marketplace by addressing the world's unmet needs. But the process will take time. The priority today is to use wealth under the ground to build assets above the ground, productive assets and productive economies. I see an opportunity of great cooperation between Turkey and the Gulf states. I see these Gulf states, of course, they started from pure white sand some 40 years ago. With the wealth that was generated in these countries, first they had to build the infrastructure. Today, you have modern infrastructure everywhere in the Gulf that you go to. Airports, roads, hospitals, schools, housing. That was necessary to start with, roads. And then the next emphasis in the Gulf today is human resource development, people. And that is the future. I see an opportunity for further cooperation between Turkey and the Gulf states. Of course, there is now significant cooperation going on, and we heard it from the officials this morning. But I think the potential is far greater. If you look at the Gulf states and what they want to do, is the wealth that is being generated is to build societies that are viable and produce other than energy. So aside from spending whatever is required as a capital to build the new economies, there is surplus funds left alone that needs to be invested, and that is, in their own mind, a replacement of a depleting asset with a productive asset. And in the past, most of that surplus funds were being invested in the industrialized world, the United States, Western Europe, and elsewhere. I think as Turkey is uplifting itself and coming to play at both regional level as well as international level, more investment funds can be directed into Turkey because there is a lot of opportunity here. So that's one area in which the Gulf states can benefit. But also I feel the industries in Turkey could extend themselves to establish some of the production lines that are needed in the Gulf itself. The experience that is gained here can be transformed. I think in summary, I would say Turkey shows nation-building example at its best. The country's success underlines the importance of a clear vision and a long-term perspective in laying the foundations for future prosperity. I see the same intentions and the same aspirations in the Gulf states, and they can benefit from the experience that's gained in Turkey. I'll say one more thing. Turkey has proven that you can maintain your religious and spiritual values and practices and still be able to build a modern society and modern economy that can compete with the world. That is a good sign for the Gulf states that believe in the same thing, and to see an example of a successful application. I see this conference, of course, going beyond what is happening today, but going regional, and that's the theme of the conference. But I just wanted to share with you at least my own observation that there is a reason for the success here, and the same intentions I'm seeing in countries in the Gulf states, whether Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, Oman. In each one of them, you meet the leaders and they want to tell you that our next, after having finished the infrastructure, is to emphasize human resource development. And thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Sayın Ali Coşkun'u buyurun efendim davet ediyorum. Teşekkür ederim. Kendilerine teşekkür ettikten sonra sıradaki konuşmacıyı davet etmek istiyorum. TÜBİTAK Başkanı Profesör Doktor Nükhet Yetiş. Sahneye teşriflerinizi rica ederim efendim. Buyurun.
Yok, buradan da seni. Çok zahmet olmuş. Aslında ben sunumumu İngilizce yapacaktım ama teamülü çok bozmayayım, Türkçe yapayım ama slaytlar İngilizce olduğu için anlaşılması da çok zor olmayacak konuklarımız açısından diye düşünüyorum. Her şeyden önce değerli bakanlarımıza ve siz değerli konuklarımıza ve Türkiye'deki değerli arkadaşlarıma iyi günler diyerek sözlerime başlamak istiyorum. Bu zirvede benimle bu bilgileri sizinle birlikte paylaşma fırsatı verdikleri için de tüm düzenleyicilere ayrıca teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Bugün çok kısa olarak ben bilim ve teknoloji